I'm Kyle Malnati, your host of the Calibrate Real Estate Podcast. At Calibrate, we exist to help people create generational wealth through real estate. My personal mission is to encourage, empower, and educate you by sharing best practices from business leaders that are proven winners. Broadcasting from the Mile High City, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Calibrate Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Malnati. I've got Eric Dezenhall with me, holding in my hands, and then over my shoulder is his 11th book, believe it or not. Congratulations, Eric, on your 11th book. It's a novel called False Light. And you'd shared with me that this is your 7th novel, 11th total book. Congratulations. And we're going to dive right into it, Eric. We're going to go over which kind of a touchy subject right now, this topic of smear campaigns and negative news, fake news, all these different things. We just finished this pretty highly contested political season. A lot of people don't love to talk about this, but you come from the political space. You're actually involved in the Reagan administration, and you do this for business owners now. You have a business of expert crisis management as a consulting business. So Eric, welcome to our show, and I'm going to get right into our first question, okay?
Thanks, Kyle. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome, and excited to have discussion on how business owners, specifically in real estate, can be realistic of the fact that we all have adversaries. And I know that that's something that you shared with me as we were prepping for the show, this kind of idea that everybody's our friend, or we're all in this cooperative environment in real estate. That is very much true. I've had someone on our show before me say that realtors actually have a co-opetition with each other where, you're going to be cooperating as a buyer's agent or a seller's agent with someone who very likely may have been the one who got second place on that listing. And it's just a funny dynamic. And not everybody's our friend. Not everybody's here to be helpful to us. And so how do you defend against character assassination if you feel like someone's really out to get you? It could be in the news media. It could be someone that's your co-opetition. But how do you defend against character assassination from your point of view, Eric?
Well, first you have to acknowledge it exists. And I think that there is a tendency nowadays to use very soft words like stakeholder. I had a client say to me once, stop using the word adversary, because I use the phrase motivated adversary a lot, because when we get a crisis case, one of the first things I look at, as important as whether or not the allegation is true, is who's the adversary. Because if you have somebody with an investment in pushing something, that's often more important than whether it's true or not. So we first have to assess, is the allegation true? I mean, if somebody says the drug that you're making has a side effect, well, that leads us one way. If it's made up, that leads us another way. Second, we look at who is behind it. I mean, one of the things we like to see, are there short sellers? Are there labor unions? Are there competitors? Is there somebody out there fanning your heartache? Because that takes us in a different direction. And so that's really where we start out. And look, in competitive situations, it's like anything else. There's competitors you like and get along with, and there's people you don't like and you don't get along with. And it is not my job, even though we're in a sharp-elbowed business, it's not my job to be a hothead. It is my job to get a client, usually a corporation or a big institution, back to work and out of crisis, because my clients make money making stuff and selling it. And if you're selling pharmaceuticals or automobiles, you don't want to be managing crisis. It's not what they do. And I mean, you saw a few days ago, I mean, maybe you didn't, it was kind of funny. There was this controversy surrounding a cereal, I think it was called Cinnamon Crunch, where a comedian claimed he found a shrimp tail in it. Well, the General Mills is not in the business of fighting bloggers about shrimp tails in their cereal. Their job is to make stuff and get it on your shelves and sell it. So it's a distraction, and we have to figure out how to solve a problem in the least distracting way. And that has gotten me also into my writing career, which deals with character assassination and fake news and manipulation and smears.
Well, and False Light is a book that's geared towards all of that. It's going to lead into maybe an uncomfortable subject, but we're not going to avoid it. We're in an era of, like you said, fake news, character assassination, and probably in very many cases, rightfully so, the Me Too movement, real big years ago as it started. And then you've got Black Lives Matter and all of these different movements that, like I said, probably start from a place of good, but then there's people that pile on to some of these movements, I'm sure, with intentions that, who knows what they have. And so as we look at that intersection between Me Too and character assassination, what's your viewpoint on all of that? And what, if someone's calling you for advice or to hire you as an expert crisis management consultant, what are some of the things that you do to prepare a client of yours?
Well, first, we have to look at what's happening in the culture. Um, when you're dealing with something explosive like Black Lives Matter or Me Too, you have to be really, really careful, because if you are a large publicly traded corporation, to be able to say, for example, well, I believe that one person who testified against Judge Kavanaugh, but the other one I didn't believe so much. Well, you could be walking into a hornet's nest just for having the conversation. And so one of the things I find, my clients, these are monster corporations and institutions. If at all possible, they don't want to be having the debate. So what they usually do is surrender as quickly as possible, because it is the most efficient way to get out of the news. Then the question becomes, by surrendering, what kind of signal does that send? And one of the signals that it can send is that you are an easy target. So a lot of what we have to do is help people balance that out. I mean, when the Black Lives Matter movement started, well, it started a few years ago, but last summer it kind of exploded with the George Floyd incident. And it was interesting because I saw most of what I advised my clients to do was to step lightly, because I don't see a correlation between falling all over yourself to show how unracist you are, that people find that terribly sincere, regardless of what your race or religion is. There is a pandering component to being able to say, to run out there and say, of all of the people in the universe, no company is more open-minded than we are. I think people get a little nauseous by that, but you also can't do nothing. And so a lot of, because the fundamental allegation is real. I mean, you do have bigotry, you do have people sexually harassing people, and you can't pass these things off as all fake and extortionate. I think companies have made a lot of mistakes in over-responding. And a lot of what you have to do, and we've been advising in many cases, is work quietly behind the scenes to shore up allies, to correct misbehavior, rather than engaging in really ostentatious displays of what's been called virtue signaling. And I don't see that as paying the dividends people think it does. I mean, look, I grew up in New Jersey in a neighborhood where everybody was Black, Italian, Jewish. If you went into my neighborhood trying to spread sunshine about how much you loved different minorities, you would be laughed at. I mean, this was not something that was respected. But by the same token, if you have a Harvey Weinstein or a George Floyd incident, you can't simply ignore it. And so a lot of what we do is try to find the middle ground that allows you to get back to work as quickly as possible. Because if you are a company or a university, there is no percentage in managing the controversy. It doesn't make you money. It doesn't help educate people. So you have to find a way to slide out of it. And a lot of what I pursued in this latest book, False Light, is a situation where my alter ego engineers a smear that capitalizes on all of this, which we can get to.
Wow. Yeah. And I am excited about getting to that. I think after hearing a few of your answers, just naturally for our audience, I've got to talk about some real life situations that I see in the real estate industry. So just to set some context, I'm the owner with my wife of a boutique brokerage firm here in Denver, Colorado. We sell real estate, we sell investment real estate, and sometimes that can be a very guarded business. There's attorneys involved and very much adversarial, where the seller side in a lot of cases is trying to, in a seller's market, win over the buyer, and vice versa. Sometimes the buyer is trying to retrade or get an advantage in the deal. And so what ends up happening, real life situation, is after a deal is done, it might have been done off market without a lot of public fanfare. And the press will hear about it. Some of the local real estate journals and different things, they'll come to us and say, you were the broker of record. What happened? And some of the stuff is public information, but there's a lot of gray area on what you can share. So that's kind of example number one, is how would, whether you're a solo realtor or a business owner, how would you suggest us working in a positive way with the press, where I have noticed in a couple of occasions where I've said something over the phone to a journalist, and all of a sudden, when I actually see it in print, whether it's on their website
different
later or in the paper, I'm like, I don't remember saying it that way, or that was sort of the way they heard it, but that was not my intention. So are there some things that, on a positive standpoint, if you're getting contacted by the press on a big deal that you did, that Eric, you would say, here's some things to watch out for?
Well, yes, first of all, there is a tendency for people to believe that the media have the force of law. But they don't. It's not the same thing as if you are sitting on the stand in a trial and the judge says, Kyle, I request that you answer that question. You have a legal obligation to do so, or you are in contempt if you don't, or guilty of perjury if you lie. But the news media do not have that force of law. Simply because they ask you something, it doesn't mean you have to answer it. And so what you always have to do with a media inquiry is raise the issue of what is in your self-interest to do. Generally speaking, slamming down the phone and running away is not a great thing. So you have to first make the calculation of what is in your interest to do. We, in my firm, we often go and fight the press because we get the ugliest cases in the history of the discipline of crisis management. I mean, my firm, we started it in 1987. There were not really crisis management firms back then. Now, every other firm you see is a crisis management firm. And the ethic back then was, oh, you don't want to fight the press. And that's usually right. And there's a reason for that has to do with the title of my book, False Light. And the reason is the First Amendment in America is considered very pure. People believe wrongly that there are laws that demand that the media be fair. There is no such law. They also believe that there are laws that demand that the media are accurate. There is no such law. You are legally allowed to be inaccurate. What you are not allowed to do is engage in what is known as actual malice, which means I know that Kyle is not a Colombian drug warlord, and I go and say to my wife, I know he's not guilty of this, but I want to hurt him, and I'm going to publish it anyway. If you are able to prove that my newspaper does that, that is conceivably defamation, or my book is called False Light, which basically means if I wrote an article, if I was a newspaper and I wrote an article about Colombian drug lords and I took a picture of Pablo Escobar and El Chapo, and then down in the corner, I put a picture of Kyle and said, Kyle has a real estate business, but I didn't specifically say that you were an evil South American drug lord, you could have a claim for false light, because even though I did not say that about you, one could conceivably read it and think that. So that is a long-winded way of saying, when you have to face an allegation, what do you push back with? Generally speaking, if you're in business and you have a controversy, the reporter wants someone in a position of wealth and power to look bad. That is their job. And you have to figure out, what is the story they want to do. And generally, the story they want to do, if you have money or power, is bad. If the subtext is you are being accused of something naughty, you probably don't want to give them that much. If you believe that you are being set up or your adversary is up to no good, you can find a way to convey that because it's not unlike a political campaign. The way you get elected is you don't only say, I'll do a better job, but if you elect this guy, he'll ruin your life. And so you have to think about this. I mean, as a business person, you understand the fundamental concept of assets and liabilities. How do you get a higher net worth? You drive up your assets and you drive down your liabilities. Well, that's how you win a PR war too. You drive up your positives, but you also have to address your adversary's negatives. And sometimes you have to let the world know about those things if things get ugly. As a general course of business, though, you don't resort to that unless you absolutely must. I mean, I do not believe starting a negative war is a generally wonderful idea, but if you're in it, you're in it.
Yeah, good advice. The next real life example that I can think of that happens all the time, and it's happened to me. And again, there was no intent for malice or disobedience or whatever, but you'll have individual or sometimes companies that are in the real estate business that will tattle on each other for different, MLS violations or this or that. And most of the time that's reported by someone that's been out of shape because you didn't update data within the window of time, and there's fines associated with it and all these other things. So again, that going on with that co-opetition type of situation, how would you look at maybe kind of more minor infractions, but the reality is that someone's trying to, after you've built up some success, it's the classic in America, you build you up and then tear you down. So that happens a lot, and you'll get reported on, you're not saying this stat correctly or that stat correctly. So what would you suggest to people in the real estate industry as it relates to that co-opetition really trying to tear them down?
Well, look, on the front end, you have to be sure that you're not willfully communicating bad information, because nowadays with the internet climate, somebody will find it and say it. And so, there was once a time where the little people couldn't call you out on something. Now, a customer that doesn't like you can go on Twitter. That's not something they could have done 20 years ago. And so you have to watch how the little people can have power. I mean, generally, I am very, very careful about what I put out there because it can be attacked. Simply because social media exists, there is a tendency for everybody in business to believe, well, we must use it. Well, it's not necessarily your friend. And before you start putting data out there in the world, you have to ask yourself, what might somebody do with this that doesn't like you? And I see time and again people misusing social media because, well, social media is a big thing. We must use it. Not necessarily. And so I would think long and hard about what you put out there before you understand what the consequences of it are, because in this climate, you can be easily attacked. The other thing I would say is I think that a lot of people overreact to criticism. It's become very fashionable for people to say, I don't care what people think of me. Yes, you do. We all do. I mean, this is human nature. We're social creatures. Nobody wants to hear that somebody thought they were a jerk. But I think that a lot of times somebody will see something, a criticism of some sort in the public domain, and believe, well, I can't let that stand. Well, one of the things I say to my corporate clients is, are a couple of idiots saying something on Twitter, or are tens of thousands of saying them and calling for a boycott? The two things are different. I debated somebody once who said, well, if a product is defective, you must immediately recall it. Now, wait a minute. My clients make millions, if not billions, of products a year. If every time a cereal container was dented, do you mean to tell me that the company has to recall all of them? That's the most ridiculous thing in the world. So what do? What you do is you have to make a risk-benefit calculation. If it's one box of cereal, you don't do much. If it is hundreds in a particular region, you may have a problem. So those are judgment calls you have to make, because too much action can blow up, cause a reaction that you didn't intend.
Yeah, I love it. And I think we can do a lot of things to prepare ourselves so that we don't find ourselves needing an expert crisis management consultant.
No, you
And I think
probably don't.
I think there's probably a lot of people that maybe get what you do confused with PR.
Yes,
And
that's right.
and I think that a lot of people in the real estate business might write press releases. Maybe they're hiring a PR company to do it, or maybe they're doing it on their own. I know for sure a lot of the people that are listening in to our episode, I like to call them Calibrate Callies or Calibrate Calvins. They're going to get approached by maybe their local board of realtors or by a chamber of commerce to do a speech. They may they may have someone call them, like we were talking about earlier, that's in the press, and they feel like they're saying something off the record and clearly it's not. And so just some suggestions for, frankly, our ego. We get approached because we've done something well and someone wants us to comment on something either in long form or in short sound bites. What are some things you'd suggest to just be aware of, to be concerned about, and making sure that you're really ready to, frankly, to deal with someone in the press?
Well, first of all, you have to go in knowing they don't necessarily have your best interest at heart. That's not their job. Number two, I think, and this is really PR, not crisis management. I mean, there's a tendency for everybody in any business to talk with their own jargon. And most of us hear jargon in industry and we have no idea what you're talking about. People talk in acronyms. I mean, I'm here in Washington. People talk about, well, you have NHTSA, and then they're talking to FDA, and then you have the PDUFA legislation, and people are, well, what are you talking about? And so most of us, even those of us who like to think that we have an IQ above plankton, we don't understand what all of this means. And I think a lot of people in business cannot talk in very, very simple terms, or they end up talking in these generic terms. I mean, I was looking at a website this morning trying to figure out what this company did, and it started talking about solutions. Well, every company is saying that they provide solutions. It doesn't tell me what you do. And so I think that sometimes in any business, you have to step out of yourself and simplify. I mean, if you're in the job of selling real estate, don't say that you're in the job of providing solutions. Say, if somebody is looking for a house, I'll find them one.
Yep.
I mean, that's much, much simpler. You don't get any points for big words.
I love that. It's great advice. It reminds me of someone that I wish I have the opportunity to interview, and maybe at some point, but I've heard a lot of his podcasts, both where he hosts as well as where he's interviewed, an author named Donald Miller that wrote a book called Building a Story Brand. And he actually communicates around presidential elections and a lot of politics, that some of the best communicators are people that speak at a fourth or a fifth grade level to the general public, instead of what a lot of people are trying to do is talk about comprehensive plans and these different things that are at maybe your 11th or 12th grade level. And Don Miller actually says that, that show, the Jeff Foxworthy show, which is continued on of Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? You really need to sort of dummy things down to make sure that it's so clear people get exactly what you're saying. And that's, like it or not, one of the things about former President Donald Trump. A lot of people said he communicated at a very, very visceral, very, fourth, fifth grade level that was digestible and easy to understand. And Donald Miller would even go as far as saying in his book and in his podcast that you really want to kind of pass that caveman test of like, ugh, I sell houses, or ugh, I sell real estate, because that's what people need to be hearing when you're communicating clearly.
Well, I think that's right. I mean, my career began in Reagan's White House, and Reagan had that ability to simplify. And Jimmy Carter was a nuclear physicist and was explaining things in terms that people didn't really understand. And a lot of the reason Reagan won was what he said in October of 1980: "Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago?" That's something that people understand. And regardless of whether you're Democrat or Republican, that's the case. I mean, I find the people who most need to be spoken to like that are people in positions of extraordinary power, because what they're used to is people trying to impress them, as opposed to going into them and saying in 30 seconds or less, It is my understanding that you want to go left. I think that is bad because if you go left, there are bears. If you go right, there are kittens. So go right. And I think that that works so much better. And, my view, if you're dealing with the chief executive of a Fortune 50 company, you want to be in and out pretty quickly. Whereas the goal that most people have is how long can I extend my stay with this person? Because I can't believe how lucky I am to be in their presence. I want it to last as long as possible. Wrong.
Yeah, you talk about Reagan, and one of the things for many people in our audience, they may not have been of age to really understand this, or they may have actually been hearing about this in history books, but a big reminder on clear communication. Reagan, as he was getting elected in the early 80s, had commented that his vision for America was that we would be a city on a hill, a shining city on a hill. And that really captured the American public as, we want to have, frankly, make America great again. The same kind of concept of we want this beacon of light, a shining city on a hill. So it's great idea, great reminder of clear communication. Let's go some of the negative stuff, some of the things that are in the public right now. And a lot of people talk about fake news, Eric. It's something I'm not, I don't know to the extent that you do, but is it really as big of a problem as maybe the media is making it out to be, this idea of fake news?
Well, you have three things. You have fake news, you have biased news, and you have news you don't like. And those are three things that are very different. Fake news is somebody getting online primarily and telling an absolutely false narrative from the ground up. And that happens on both sides of the political aisle. I mean, you have people who will tell you that Bill and Hillary Clinton run a child molestation ring. That's ridiculous. You have people who will tell you that Donald Trump's family were active in the Nazi Party. That is also ridiculous. So you can find that type of thing wherever you want, but that's primarily online. A lot of things that are referred to as fake news is another way of saying, I don't like that. And Trump was very good at that. If he didn't like it, he would say it's fake news and therefore nullify it. A lot of us have news that we don't like. But then you have the issue that I think is the biggest problem, which is biased news. A lot of times what you see is the news media will go after people they don't like and ignore the foibles of those that they do like. One of the things you'll see in False Light that I talk about is there is a reporter in the book who is very heavily tied to plaintiffs' lawyers, left of center NGOs, labor unions, and short sellers. One of the things in my business that I complain about a lot is my clients are often being targeted by those groups, trial lawyers and others. The media tend to take what those groups say and publish it because number one, they agree with it, and number two, it's newsworthy. I mean, 60 Minutes has been on the air for more than a half century, and so much of what they do is they ambush a big hitter that they don't like at the behest of someone who claims to be one of the little people. And they're often right. But what I view as very biased news is the fact that large media organizations have an unholy relationship with people that they agree with. There's nothing illegal about it, but it's very biased, and that never comes out. And I think that's what you have to watch. I mean, we used to joke that coverage of homelessness spikes during Republican presidential administrations. Well, there's no homeless when Democrats are in office. But by the same token, you see that every which way. I mean, I don't make my living in politics. I make my living applying a political model to what goes on in business. So I think that where we're headed is an environment where everyone is going to find the news that they want. And I think that is a problem. I don't think the problem of completely fabricated news is as big a problem as people are saying it is, because you can get called out on it. I know that if you go after one of my clients and say something fraudulent, there will be sanction. Given what somebody like me does for a living, if somebody says that XYZ Corporation is selling a harmful product, we will come hard at you. But how do you defend against the perfectly legal efforts by the news media to ruin targets they don't like? They are allowed to do it. And the courts are very clear on this, that the First Amendment must be protected at almost any cost. So defamation filings are difficult. And a lot of what I do in False Light is I take the experiences of, the better part of 4 decades in the controversy business, and I unearth what I would do if I were let loose to ruin a target without regard for morality and without regard for legality. What would I do if I were let loose? And that's why I think one of the things you see is a lot of the mischief in terms of media manipulation is coming from overseas, because there's no sanction. I mean, what are you going to do? Find somebody in a basement in an apartment in Estonia and bring them to justice? No, you're not. And we can have a debate about whether Putin's efforts were effective. I think that they were probably oversold, but there is no question that he's making mischief. What are you going to do? Sue Putin? No, you're not. You can't.
Yeah, it's interesting. We apply a lot of our, whatever country you're in, as you listen to this, your legal structure, and it really doesn't exist once you get into international waters, as they might say, and certainly not across, a different country with someone with as much power as Putin or other leaders. Last question for you, Eric, before we go into some of our common questions that we ask every one of our guests. Are you pessimistic about where we are from a media standpoint? And, over that 40-year career, do you feel like we've gotten to this point where journalism has changed over your career?
Yes, I am not terribly optimistic. There's good and bad news. I mean, I think that what a lot of journalism has become, what you will see in False Light is the main character is an old line reporter in his 50s. This is someone who takes journalism seriously. He believes that journalism means to do research, to report. And what he is up against is a younger generation, a younger reporter who wants him gone because she doesn't think he's woke enough. And he is an older, straight, white guy, which means fair game. Nobody cares what happens to this guy. And in the antagonist, you have somebody who basically believes journalism is about knocking off people you don't like. And, I'll knock somebody off by dinner. I'll get on TV in the evening and talk about it. I'll get a book deal by the next morning. And by the weekend, I'll have Charlize Theron cast as me in the movie. And that's kind of where journalism is going. But it's a directional thing. It doesn't mean I believe every journalist is bad. And contrary to one of the things I disagreed with Trump about was I don't think the Washington Post and the New York Times are completely fabricating news stories. I think what they are doing is choosing to report on what they want, which is a very, very different thing. So what I think is a problem, and I talk about this in False Light in a way that's hopefully entertaining, people seem to think it is we're going to seek out the news that we want. If you're a Democrat, you're going to seek out news that confirms that you are right. If you are a Republican, you're going to pick out news that you are right. And I think that is of concern because it's going to be very balkanized, where we're going to be seeking the information that validates our worldview. And I don't think that that's a very good thing, largely because what journalism traditionally provided were referees. If 30 years ago, if I called Dan Rather and I said, Kyle is a bank robber, he would say, how do you know that? Now I just go on Twitter and say, Kyle's a bank robber, and go ahead and find me. Go ahead and sue me. I think social media is a massive net negative in terms of honest communications. But what are we going to do about it? It's not going away.
Yeah, you're right about that. It's certainly not going away. And I think we've got a lot of different things to work out, of course, in our society. But at the same time, one of the things that has been proven here over the last, year or so is that the stock market, the economy, likes polarity. They like two sides. We're in a culture, if you think about a lot of history, a lot of history, whether you go back to the Bible or some other historic text, we were in, agrarian kind of agricultural societies where a lot of things were positioned that way. Nowadays, a lot of our culture is based on sports. We don't have a lot of, we do have wars, but we don't have wars like you did in 200 BC where people are conquering people and crushing them. And, so what ends up happening is we live out war in sports. And that's very clearly, use the referee as an example, very clearly, are you for the home team or the away team? Are you for the, the elephants or the donkeys? Are you the blue side or the red side? Are you left or are you right? And it's not going away. I think what you've helped us, and obviously False Light is going to help us even more with a cool spin on the novel side of things with a lot of truth baked into it, is just that this is where we are, and how do you tango with that tension? How do you dance with it? Because it is important to make sure that as a business owner and as someone that's out there, there are people that are out there to get you. There are adversaries and people that want to see you fail.
Yeah, and a lot of what I did in the book is my editor said to me, take away your morality and take away your respect for the law. If there was a bad actor out there that you wanted to take down, what would you do? And the result is what you see in False Light.
Which makes it really a great read, I'm sure. By the way, before we move on to the last part of our show here, Eric, kudos to Greenleaf Book Group Press. They set up this interview
Yes,
in
thank
many
you.
ways, and that's where the book is published through. Where a couple of good ways, obviously Amazon's probably an obvious one, but where would you like people to go get False Light?
Probably Amazon is the easiest way to do it. I mean, store distribution is spotty these days, but Amazon or Barnes and Noble. I know Amazon has had the most activity, is the easiest.
Great. And then obviously another plug to Greenleaf, you can go to gbgpress.com to see those authors and several others that we've had on the Calibrate Real Estate Podcast. All right, Eric, you ready for a couple of quick hitter questions that we ask all of our guests?
Yes, I will answer your hard questions.
No, these won't be hard. They're not pressing. They're intended to put a positive light on the author of False Light. So here we go. First question, obviously our show and my real estate brokerage here in Colorado is called Calibrate. That word quite literally means to iterate. It's an approach that a lot of people will use in science and engineering to make adjustments through experiments, taking external factors into account, allowing comparison with other data, basically one step in front of the other to get to our desired result through iteration. What is something that you do on a regular basis to calibrate your life?
All right. So the stress of my business is extraordinary. And I've been sipping a dangerous brew for many, many years. And sipping from this business, it doesn't always build your immune system. Sometimes it tears it down. And the way I deal with it is I create worlds that I control. And I do that through writing. And I've done that in 11 books. The other is exercise. I mean, the fact is to do what I do for a living, when the best that you can achieve sometimes is to turn a mountain of horse manure into a mere hill of horse manure. That is not the win you're hoping for in the world. So a lot of what I like to do is try to control it, and I control it by writing books.
I love that you shared that. You're the first person. We've had a lot of authors on our show, but you're the first person to actually say that. Exercise is an obvious one, so I'm going to focus in on the writing part of it. I heard another author that we hope to have on the show, and we've got this person booked, and you just never know how schedules are going to work out, but they're booked to be on the show. I heard them say that whether you write an 80,000 word book or you're writing a 500 word blog post or a 100 word email, that you're a writer, and it's an outlet.
Right.
And what about that process, Eric, helps you maybe disconnect, de-stress? What about it helps you calibrate on a daily basis?
Well, there's something about seeing your thoughts on a piece of paper, and then you go back and evaluate them. And I know as I look at things I've written over the years, not published things, but I'll look at something that I've scrawled out on a piece of paper, and I'll say, you're really an idiot. You really thought you were profound at this point, but nothing that you said here has any value whatsoever. And it helps you refine your thinking, because I mean, I started on a novel when I was in college. I can't find it, and I'm thankful I can't find it because I imagine it had every cliche that somebody 20 years old would do. But I also look at things I've done. I mean, I look at the impact that false light has had on people in discussing some of the issues that are going on today, Me Too and media manipulation. It also deals with, what it's like to be somebody in a stage of a career where you have more years behind you than you do ahead. So I find it therapeutic to organize your thoughts as opposed to having them just banging around in your head.
Your answer is a great segue to our next question, which is this concept of Dear Younger Me. I've dubbed it. This is not a part of the song, but there's this song that a writer of the song is writing back to themselves when they're in their 20s and sharing different advice from things that didn't work out so well. And I've dubbed that basically the advice you wish you knew when you were 22. And you said it, you kind of like cringe a little bit as you look back. If you find something that's 10 years, 15 years ago, and you're like, man, I've lived so much life. I have a different perspective. You're quite literally a different writer today than when you were in your 20s. And so as you talk about those cliches and silly things that you might look back at and say, man, I can't believe I said that. If you were to meet someone in a book line, you're autographing books and there may be an aspiring author, we'll make it that's the context. And they say, Eric, you've written 11 books. I'm just trying to write my first book. What advice would you give to someone in their 20s?
I would give the advice that an uncle of mine gave to me when I was 17 that it took me decades to understand. I was starting to look at colleges, and this was a very tough guy. You can use your imagination. It was New Jersey in the 70s. And he said, did your parents ever tell you you could be anything you want to be? And I said, yeah, well, sure. And he went, you can't. It's ridiculous. Every sitcom or drama on TV ends with somebody saying to a young person, you can be anything you want to be. And he said, the best you can do is the best that is doable with the skills that you have. All we know now at 17 is you seem to be a pretty bright kid. What we don't know is how smart, and we don't know the extent to which the world will value what you have. You could be a genius with a lot of luck, in which case you'll rule the world. You could be a genius with no luck, and then you're in trouble. You could be a moron with a lot of luck, in which case you can go pretty far. And I think we know what happens if you're a moron with no luck. And I think that I probably over attributed the extent to which I had power over the universe. Whereas I'm much more proportional now, and I'm less inclined to be hard on myself if I am unable to control external variables. And I think when I was younger, I had the delusion that I could. This doesn't mean, by the way, that you surrender free will and go, there's nothing I can do about anything. There is a lot you can do. I mean, I've built a business. I've written books that didn't exist unless I did it. But whether or not the world stands up and uniformly says, we think you're the greatest thing in the world, I don't believe I have control over that. And I thought I did. Do the best that's doable.
That's great advice. I like it. I really like that a lot. As a parent, I like that. I've got 3 kids that are all in upper elementary school, about to go to junior high, about to go to middle school, as they would say. But then I also coach youth lacrosse and talk about life living out on the field, winners and losers, bumps and bruises. I mean, it's like any sport. It's really a microcosm of life. It's a really cool thing. Great advice, Eric. Final question is actually a continuation of that last question. So we're on episode 170. Episode
Wow.
5, kind of the original episodes, I interviewed my career coach, someone that I respect a lot. And this is a number of years ago now. And his answer to that question came from a book. He was in a mentoring group when he was in his 20s. And sort of the leader of that group said, guys, you've got to read this book called The Principle of the Path by Andy Stanley. And in that book, Andy Stanley has his reader write their own obituary. So very similar to kind of concepts we were talking about. You think of someone in the press writing about all the things you did in your life. And hopefully that's not false light. Hopefully it's in a positive light. But as a memorial to this person, Chris Oakley, Chris passed away actually about a year and a half ago in a tragic hunting accident. And what he shared with me as he answered that question, the Dear Younger Me question, is he shared that writing his obituary was one of the most clarifying things in his life. And this was prior to him obviously passing away, and was eerie to listen to it again when I learned about him passing. We were good friends and stayed in touch from a business standpoint. And it just created some clarity for him for the next decade to live from his late 20s to his late 30s on purpose. So as a writer, as someone who's accomplished a lot, Eric, what would you want to be known for? If instead of an obituary, if a loved one in your family were to deliver your eulogy, what would you want them to say at your funeral?
That I have created a better paracosm, little world for the people I care about, because I think that's really what it's about. And I think that the family issue, that's a you do that privately. And I know a lot of what I'm trying to do career wise is think about the next generation and to think about what I'm giving them, because it's been very, I mean, one of the reasons why I write books is that there is an intellectual principle behind what we do. And it is important to me, and it's part of my vanity, that this thing that was created continues, and that it continues to be good. That, and look, in the writing, a lot of what's important to me is I have no control over whether or not I'm going to be a bestseller. And I'm not a runaway bestseller, but I do have control over what I write and put into it. And so a lot of what I'm trying to do is control everything that's controllable and hope that that contributes to building the foundation of this new little world for colleagues and my family.
It's a great answer. And I think of just the root word of being an author is that you're an authority on a subject or on a variety of subjects. You become an authority. And the cool thing, pulling this all back to what you do in crisis management, is no matter what, when you write a book and it's published, people know where you stand. And you go through this iterative approach. I mean, I've heard, not having written a book, but the outline process and then the editing process, I mean, are just grueling for authors. And I actually even heard this, I don't remember the author, but picked this up, that a famous author, after getting their first manuscript just beaten to heck with red pen all over it, they asked on the next time, can you put green pen for your edits? Just because it was that humbling to have their work basically scrutinized. But at the end of the day, a generation from now, your kids, your grandkids, anybody that knows you can say, this is exactly where Eric Dezenhall stood. This is exactly what his perspective was. And I just kudos to you for 11 books. There's a lot of people who've got one book banging around in their head. Final parting advice, Eric, just on someone that's an aspiring author and what they should do.
Well, stop thinking about what you're going to say when you go on Oprah and focus on writing the book. Because one of the things, I mean, I'm contacted constantly by people who want to write books. And I always think of, there's a joke by the British comedian Peter Cook. He said, I was at a party and a guy said to me, I'm working on a novel. And I said, really? Neither am I. Because we all, I think, delude ourselves in thinking that the world wants to hear our life story. And that's not what the world wants. They either want to learn something or be entertained. And ask yourself, are you writing something down where people are going to learn or be entertained? Because if not, go watch an episode of Seinfeld.
That's great advice. It's why I do podcasts, is to both learn myself. And I'm sure you know this as an author, but I feel like if the benefit is only, and this is pretty simplistic, but if it's only between you and I having this conversation, that's in and of itself is beneficial, because it helps me be better in the business, it helps me be better in just my personal life. But I know it's not, because I hear all the different positive feedback as you do as an author. So thank you for continuing to produce content that helps people learn things, and frankly, as a novel, helps entertain people. Eric Dezenhall, I'm going to hold it up one last time. Congrats on the book, False Life. Thank you to Greenleaf for setting this interview up. Thank you to our podcast producer, Ann Russell, for booking and producing the show and editing it. And Eric, as I love to say to our audience, we will see you around the neighborhood. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks very much, Kyle.